This video was made possible through the support of my patrons.
Our battle cry will be total extermination!
They are to be exterminated.
Exterminate, annihilate, destroy! Daleks conquer and destroy!
Exterminate them.
The Daleks shall sweep away Gallifrey!
Do not deviate.
Exterminate!
Exterminate!
Exterminate! The Daleks must survive! Exterminate! Exterminate! Exterminate!
It's the beginning of the end now for the 13th Doctor. After the events of Doctor Who Flux sealing her fate after a confrontation with the embodiment of time, we now have 3 extra-length specials in 2022 to conclude this Doctor's journey. With Yaz and Dan still along for the ride, you've got to wonder what types of adventures could follow Flux, which was a 6-part epic that dealt with an apocalyptic event across time and space. Well, maybe a story like Eve of the Daleks was the best palate cleanser, an episode with a returning flexible enemy in a single location with a tiny cast stuck in a repeating time loop. With Eve of the Daleks by Chris Chibnall apparently written in just over 2 weeks and filmed in a similar time span from newcomer director Annetta Laufer, perhaps less will be more. This might be something more fun and focused like Resolution, and less muddled and scattershot like Revolution, though the latter did make up for it with spectacle. Our story follows Sarah, the sole worker of Elf Storage Facility on New Year's Eve, played by Aisling Bea, and Nick, her only customer, making his annual visit to his storage room, played by Ajani Salmon. After resetting the TARDIS after the events of the Flux, the 13th Doctor, along with Yaz and Dan, arrive in the Manchester warehouse only to discover that the Daleks have followed them there and exterminate them on sight. However, it appears that our quintuple of protagonists are caught in a time loop, and it's shrinking fast on a crash course to midnight. Trapped by a Dalek force field, and with hardly any resources, the group must use the trial and error of the time loop to escape the Dalek Executioner Squad and prevent maximum extermination. Doctor Who, despite being a show that revolves around time travel, doesn't seem to explore the 4th dimension all that often, and while stories before have toyed with time loops, they've not quite been this open about it. Remember, Heaven Sent is a story where the 12th Doctor himself is the only looping element. The universe around him is still moving forward.
I didn't know better. I'd say I travelled 7,000 years into the future.
This format change, which even Dan Lewis points out is like Groundhog Day, is a clever conceit for a story based on New Year's Eve. This is Chris Chibnall's 4th New Year special, and I like how most of these specials are actually about new beginnings and new starts. Resolution revolved around Ryan making amends with his dad and him and Graham moving forward. Spyfall was about the start of a new adventure, and Revolution of the Daleks was basically committed to not being about much of anything, to be honest. Several loops into Eve of the Daleks, the group have a team huddle, make clear their plans and intentions, and use this time loop that will end at the start of a new year to learn from the mistakes of that year to fight back smarter and harder as the clock ticks down.
Something seems impossible. We try. It doesn't work. We try again. We learn. We improve. We fail again. But better. We make friends. We learn to trust. We help each other. We get it wrong again. We improve together, then ultimately succeed. Because this is what being alive is, and it's better than the alternative.
I especially like how, with every reset, the loop shortens. As much as I love films like Groundhog Day, Palm Springs, and Happy Death Day, they can often struggle with the stakes beyond the immediate and the personal. The latter example teases that injuries from one death to another pass over, but it never really dwells on it. In Eve of the Daleks, the shortening of the time loop is not just a great stakes raiser, but it also gives an organic story reason to cut straight to the action rather than repeat the opening beats, and it also means that this story has to conclude within this hour of television. Now, that last remark may sound a bit silly, but a lot of time loop stories do often spend their first few loops with these characters trying to figure out what's going on. Here, the cast cotton on pretty quickly, which is good because the audience likely already know what's going to happen going into the episode, and the Dr. Yaz and Dan are literally time time travelers, it would be odd if they didn't realize it quickly. Eve of the Daleks is a really brisk watch, with the exception of maybe the first 2 loops where the premise gets established, including what is now the longest pre-title sequence in Doctor Who history, beating out the previous record holder, The Return of Dr. Mysterio, by 11 seconds. We don't spend that long in these loops. Our heroes try something, it goes wrong, or a wrinkle gets thrown in, and then they try again. It was also clever to make this a Dalek story, because it means you don't need to introduce a new threat. You just need to establish that these Daleks have learned from their past mistakes and are playing for keeps here.
Daleks learn. Exterminate!
The Daleks are pretty great in this story. Firstly, they've got these Gatling guns, which look awesome, but I'm not entirely sure on the practical use of them outside of the visual shorthand of these being upgraded weapons that the Doctor can't sonic into disruption. But I love how they're shot, with awesome low angles and great lighting. This is a pretty stock and basic location, but Annetta Lawfer gets a lot of mileage out of the setting. There's some genuinely creepy moments here, like the Daleks just slowly gliding around searching for Sarah and Nick in the basement, the Daleks over Dan and Yaz's shoulder as well. Chills, I love it. Though I do miss the plungers. If we saw the Daleks' new appendage do something, then it could justify the change, but this is a nitpick on my part. As for how the Daleks are characterized, it's a great melding of premise and character to have these relentless killing machines literally trying to brute force and make an execution stick during a time loop. The Daleks didn't even start the time loop, they're just running with it, and probably making the most out of the ability to kill their greatest enemy multiple times.
We are relentless. Your ultimate extermination and execution is inevitable. You are trapped, Doctor.
As someone who has loved how Chris Chibnall has characterized the Daleks over the past few years, I will say that this episode felt like a marked downgrade, mainly due to the format. We don't really have the opportunity to properly follow the Daleks like we did in Resolution, or see their contradictory ethos at play like in Revolution. It is standard Dalek action here, but it's serviceable, even if the whole Daleks do not bit was a bit played out, very in character, but also very repetitive.
You'll answer for that.
Daleks answer to no one. Daleks do not store stuff. Daleks do not have managers. Daleks are patient. Daleks are never sorry. Daleks do not have friends. Daleks are not fair. Daleks are not worried.
If this is the final outing for the bronze iteration of the Pepper Pots, it will be a high note, and quite symbolic for that final shot of the destroyed casing in the rubble of Elf storage facility as the fireworks rage on. And of course, shout out to this potential inadvertent but perfect reference to Dalek voice actor Nicholas Briggs.
You all done, Nick?
I am not Nick.
But let's talk about Nick and Sarah, as they are our new characters for this special. So Sarah inherited this storage facility from her great uncle and hates her job. Apparently there's a co-worker there called Jeff who was meant to work this New Year's Eve but dropped out, leaving Sarah alone to deal with Nick, who is the facility's only customer due to him being a Platinum Card member. So far so good. Sarah is an incredibly sardonic and disinterested person who clearly does not like Nick very much, and Aisling Bea is terrific in playing this part of the character. Distant from her family, doesn't seem to have much of a life outside of this business that she's been forced to take on, and she's very open to speaking her mind.
Mammy, it's 4 minutes to midnight every year. Why you calling me now?
The lines will all be busy at midnight.
No, they won't, because it's not 1973.
Oh my god, I'm so glad that someone actually said it. It's so strange, but even during this past New Year's just gone, I had friends and family talking about clogged phone lines at midnight, even though that's not how phone lines have worked in this century. That moment immediately got me on side with Sarah. I loved the scenes of her trying to make sense of the situation, talking down to the Doctor, and even this brilliant moment of her trying to tell off the Dalek. All wonderful.
Look. No. Just no, okay? Because this is my premises, and you, sir, are trespassing, okay? So just shoo, just go, just get.
But the issue here comes from Nick. And don't get me wrong, I think Ajani Salmon does the best with the material. We get some strong comedy in some scenes, but there are others that really did not gel with me.
It was a lot of strategic analysis, weapons assessment, and battle-ready thinking.
Did you duck?
Yeah.
Nice.
I can't imagine anyone delivering that joke any better. It's just the joke that's the problem. You can see the punchline from a mile away. The issue here is the character himself. Now, Nick is clearly a socially awkward guy. He comes to Elf Storage Facility every New Year's Eve because he's dropping off items from his flats that belonged to his ex-girlfriends. Now, on paper, I can actually give him the benefit of the doubt. Part of me thinks it's even nice to make sure that his ex's stuff is stored safely in case they ask for it. It's something that could look strange from the outside, like Nick could be a serial killer who is keeping trophies, and the episode even acknowledges this.
They're alive still out there?
Of course. Oh, God. Of course.
But it's actually an innocent gesture once you realise what's happening. The issue here is twofold. One, Nick comes to this facility every year because he knows that Sarah is going to be there alone, and Nick has a crush on her. Now, that is creepy, especially since Sarah clearly does not reciprocate these feelings. And two, it's hard to get invested in Nick's multi-year unrequited crush on Sarah when he's going through so many girlfriends that he even has his own cataloguing system for their belongings. What is Nick doing so wrong if he's burning through this many relationships? And like I said, Sarah is clearly not interested. She's so sardonic and dismissive of him right off the bat, and to be fair to her, he's asking random questions about what can't be stored for reasons. I don't really know why this bit exists and why it goes on for this long. And when the two get killed, during their second loop, Nick goes back to try and rescue Sarah, but Sarah doesn't have the same selfless motives, and she even admits this to him later on.
I didn't come and try to save you that second time.
Maybe if they'd shown a montage at the beginning of the episode of Nick coming to the warehouse over the past few New Years, and there's maybe some flirty banter between the two, which could show a yearly loop becoming an actual loop in the story, like the metaphorical becomes the literal, showing a lack of change over years between the two, which they finally break through in this story, then we'd have something. And it also means that Nick's borderline stalking behaviour would not come across as badly as it does here. But this is really, really bad. Nick is out of line here, and it makes it very hard to invest in this romance. It's not like in Resolution where Lynn and Mitch like each other and they're waiting for the other to make the first move. No, this is a relationship where Sarah is guilt-tripped into dating Nick because he dies. It's not good or convincing. Aisling Bea and Ajani Salmon are so committed to these personas and these archetypes in the first half of the episode through their performances that when they're required to change, the shift isn't convincing. I also think the episode isn't quite sure how the audience or even the characters are supposed to regard Nick. I mean, Yaz herself asks whether or not all of these exes are still alive, but when Sarah starts showing her discomfort, Yaz calls her out for it.
He's standing right there.
It's fine.
No, it's not fine.
The episode's not quite aware of the type of person Nick is, how he's coming across, or even how other characters are meant to respond to him. Though credit where it's due, I did like Nick's first reaction to try and talk the Dalek down once he comes to the conclusion that this is all of his fault. Obviously, it was never going to work, but it's clear that Nick is a good guy. It's just not communicated in this episode very well, and I did really like the scene of Sarah phoning her mum again to say that she loves her, but she's taken off guard so much that they can't have a moment. It's a nice subversion, it's in character for Sarah and played incredibly well.
And I miss you. And I love you. Yeah, because I'm not really sure I say that enough.
Are you drunk?
No, I'm not drunk, Mammy.
Oh, God, are you ill?
No, I'm not. Do you know what? Happy New Year, I love you, but I have to go.
Also, while it's nice to see Mrs. Doyle herself, Pauline McLynn, in this episode, it seems a bit of a waste for her to just be on the other side of her phone. Now, obviously, it's safe and easy work, but maybe this is a casting decision that could have been kicked down the road a little bit more, you know, until a more active role came up for Pauline McLynn. I also think that her cameo as a plot device is a bit overthought. While it's funny that the fate of these characters rests on Sarah's mum calling her when she actually wants her to, why can't Yaz, Dan, or even Nick call Sarah's phone from their own phone? Seems a bit strange to rely on pure chance on something they really could take control of. Also, speaking of these plot points that don't quite add up, let's talk about the stakes in the time loop. So the TARDIS, when it resets, is what starts the loop. Okay, that's fine. But it's the Daleks who create the force field to trap them inside. Okay, it works so far. But why is the force field only around the door to reception? Everyone manages to escape the warehouse at the end through the back door, so why did the Daleks create a force field with a massive escape point? Also, we get this potential second act wrinkle.
Nick doesn't survive past 5-2. So if he doesn't survive this time, then there's not going to be another 5-2. It'll be 4 minutes to. And then he'll be dead. Properly.
I'm not sure how that's relevant. Like, most of the cast die at different times over the course of the episode, but come back anyway. I mean, the death of the cast isn't what created the loop, it was the TARDIS resetting, which happened about a minute or two before Nick died, so where has this come from? Why would you come to this conclusion? And to top it all off, this wrinkle is fixed a scene later when Nick ducks and destroys the two Daleks. So the Doctor didn't have to put aside her plan to rescue him, and Sarah didn't do anything to ensure that he was saved. It seemed to be setting up a character beat, and if it paid a character beat off, then, you know, I would overlook the discrepancy in the logic, but that never even happens because Nick saves himself. Also, speaking of stakes, the characters will apparently survive and break out of the loop if they can escape by midnight. This clip is the first time it's mentioned in the episode.
If we can stay alive and be outside the building when midnight hits, we might stand a chance of getting clear of this.
Now, where did this idea come from? I mean, it's got to be midnight because it's a New Year's story, but outside of the coincidence of when the time loop was created, midnight has no bearing on anything. The Doctor just says that they need to escape by midnight, and the episode just goes along with it, as if that's the established rule, with no groundwork or evidence. It's a pretty sloppy way of presenting the rules of the loop. It reminds me of how in Survivors of the Flux, Tecteun brings up a final Flux event, and then the whole series, including characters who weren't even around for that revelation, just go along with it as if this was always part of the plan. Speaking of rules, so you're not able to store explosives and hazardous materials at Elf storage facility, but because they need a way to destroy the Daleks, they just so happen to come across those things because Jeff is a rule breaker. This really does feel contrived. Like, who is Jeff? Why does he have this stuff? How can Sarah own this building and this business and have no idea what he's doing? And Jeff might even live here?
You know, it was a family obligation, and then everyone was grieving, and then I sort of stepped in to help. It just sort of became my life, really, when I wasn't looking.
This building became your life, but you had no idea what Jeff was doing? I actually would have forgiven this contrivance if it turned out that it wasn't Jeff, but Carl, the crane operator from The Woman Who Fell to Earth, who was the only other customer at the facility, or something like that. I would just really respect the audacity of a twist like that. But without that sort of context, his appearance here at the end is welcome? But I have many questions. Like, why is a crane driver from Sheffield in Manchester just wandering the streets not only on New Year's Eve, but when the clock strikes midnight? When Time said that forces were amassing against the Doctor at the end of The Vanquishers, I wasn't really expecting Carl in Manchester. In fact, that's a point. This is the first ever TV episode of Doctor Who to be set in Manchester. And it's just in a warehouse. That's a bit of a letdown. Anyway, let's finish up by talking about our main cast, because there's quite a few interesting things here. Firstly, we've got the trio escaping the TARDIS when the Doctor resets it to fix the damage done during Flux, which is a nice bit of continuity to see cross over. The shots of the Doctor escaping as the gears in the background turn look incredible. It's a terrific first impression from Annetta Laufer, and it's easily the most visually interesting this TARDIS interior has ever looked. It was set up so well that I was almost expecting a redesign at the end of the episode, but nope, same old TARDIS. I like the dynamic here between 13, Yaz and Dan, and how Dan has fully become a part of the team. John Bishop is terrific in this episode, with his standout moment easily being when he takes the initiative to distract the second Dalek in reception, confident in making it to the next loop. It's such a brilliant scene, with Dan taunting the Dalek and doing what fans have talked about for years, just circling around the pepper pot to avoid its gunfire. It's brilliant. I genuinely think that Dan could have just run around in circles for the entire episode if necessary. Dan is clearly the most emotionally mature person in this TARDIS, which is probably why he was able to spot, and he ends up speaking up about, Yaz clearly pining for the Doctor.
Have you ever told her?
Told her what?
How you feel about her?
Is it that obvious?
Now, it's been hinted at since around Series 12 that Yaz may have developed feelings for the Doctor, and here it's starting to leave the subtext and just become the text, which is a pretty interesting development. Whether or not it will have time in the next two specials to pay off is the big question here, but there's definitely potential. We don't quite know whether or not the Doctor reciprocates these feelings, but considering that she was told last time that she's going to die, she might be reluctant to lead Yaz on or hurt her. But the best part about this subplot, for me, is this moment.
I don't know what to do, Dan. I've never told anyone. Not even myself.
That line almost winded me. We've seen in multiple stories that Yaz has had mental health troubles, a rough childhood and low self-esteem, so hearing her say this not only feels like a natural step for the character, but just further builds on the foundations that have been laid before. Mandip Gill really is a terrific actor, by the way. This scene with her, and John Bishop as well in the basement, it's so well performed by both of them, and just like Yaz's reaction here has been built up by previous episodes, I love Dan's motivation for speaking up here, wanting to make sure that Yaz does not go through the same thing that he went through with Di. It feels like a great consequence and building upon the events of the last season. This is like a really great follow-through.
I took way too long to tell somebody that I liked them, and then the universe ended and everything got messy. I wouldn't want that to happen to you, Sheffield.
Dan lets the Doctor know that Yaz has feelings for her, and she doesn't respond. While this is in character for the Doctor to just deflect or ignore her companion's feelings when she's uncomfortable.
So I'm just going to subtly walk towards the console and look at something. And then I'll think of something that I should have said that might have been helpful.
It just seems like the 13th Doctor hasn't really changed or grown, which is an issue when Chibnall keeps repeating these beats and these culminations, kind of like how in The Timeless Children it ended with the Doctor reassuring herself that she is still the Doctor regardless of her past. Then in Revolution of the Daleks she has to do exactly the same thing. The Doctor ends The Vanquishers by apologising to Yaz for being distant, for not letting her in and changing the subject to avoid hard conversations. But in Eve of the Daleks...
What did you mean when you said your actions were catching up with you? Nothing. Nothing. I don't remember. I say lots of things. We all say lots of things we don't mean.
Has the Doctor even learned anything? Like, this repetition of threatening to pay off and develop characters, but instead having them run in place, is what concerns me about the future of the Doctor and Yaz's relationship, if there even is one. It's frustrating in the short term, because it means that there isn't a payoff in this episode, and it's frustrating in the long term, because the Doctor is making the same mistakes time and time again. It would be like if the 10th Doctor ended every single one of his seasons by becoming the Time Lord victorious. That being said, I think Jodie Whittaker's performance is really strong in this episode. She really sells the motivational speech to the group, her interactions with the Daleks are terrific as always, and...
You took your time? Not even wearing a watch, doing it for show.
That delivery kills me. Also, while I'm here, I thought the idea of the decoy loop was genuinely inspired. With the Daleks learning from previous loops, the Doctor decides to use their penultimate loop to throw off the Daleks' analysis. Second Akinola's music is terrific during this sequence. You can genuinely feel the tension build as the final loop approaches, and these characters know they only have one more chance.
You will never escape execution.
Let's see, shall we? Brace for the final go-around.
Exterminate!
I've talked about previous examples of time loop movies that I love, Groundhog Day, Palm Springs, but I don't think I've seen a time loop piece of media where there is a direct antagonist for them to fight that follows them through the loop, who is also aware of the loop. And very rarely in time loop media are the characters conscious of a final loop, knowing they only have one more shot. So this is edge of your seat stuff. I also think that this distraction throws the Daleks off their game as well. You can tell that they're afraid of messing up and they're going into the last loop blind. This is a terrific power play. Eve of the Daleks is a fun time. I liked the time loop conceit, John Bishop and Aisling Bea are the performance highlights, and it was a decent Dalek showcase. These villains really are so versatile in that you can throw them into a new premise like this, and half of the joy comes from seeing them just roll with the punches. Outside of that, the characterization is hit and miss. The story doesn't quite seem aware of how creepy and off-putting Nick's behaviour is, and while Yaz coming to terms with her feelings for the Doctor is a welcome development, that final scene in the TARDIS does not inspire much confidence in getting a good payoff in the next two specials. Also, some of the time loop logistics feel really weakly established, though conversely, the narrowing of the loop and the penultimate decoy loop make up for it in a dramatic sense, in my eyes at least. It's a mixed bag leaning on the good, but I appreciated the small stakes story in light of Flux. Oh, and New Year festivities are still happening on Earth, and Dan even says the Doctor saved the universe last week, so it seems the universe is fine after the Flux. This feels like a holdover detail from last series that really should have been established beyond an almost throwaway line. Anyway, let's look ahead at the next special and the 13th Doctor's penultimate chapter, where the TARDIS team travel to the 19th century and encounter not only the pirate queen, Madam Ching, but an old adversary in Legend of the Sea Devils. I'll see you next time. Hey folks, Happy New Year. Thank you so much for watching my review of Eve of the Daleks. If you liked this video, then I've got loads more reviews of the Jodie Whittaker era, also some classic series stories reviews, some modern series, some review marathons. Check all of those out. If you want to subscribe, then please feel free to do so. It massively helps to support the channel, as well as hitting that like button. That really helps me out as well. Let me know what you folks thought of Eve of the Daleks in the comment section below, and where would you rank it in terms of like other Chris Chibnall New Year specials. So between now and the next, like 3 or 4 months, we're going to be getting a new Doctor Who special with Legend of the Sea Devils. Between now and then, I'm going to dive more into classic Doctor Who. I think I'm going to review the Sea Devil story. I think I'm going to try and review Evil of the Daleks again, because there's the new animated recreation, Galaxy 4. Let me know if there's anything you want me to review down below. Once again, that comment section is just go nuts. And if you folks have noticed by now, these wonderful names scrolling by on the screen, they're my patrons. They help to keep the lights on here. They get reviews early because of Content ID stuff. They also get access to a Mr. TARDIS Discord server where we watch Doctor Who, we have watch parties, and we talk about like a Doctor Who book club, things like that. Be sure to check all of it out through the links in the description to become a patron, and you can also get your name in the credits. And I'd like to give a shout out to these particular patrons: Anne Neubauer, Andrew, Dean Jones, Andrew Blewett, Callum Baird, Daniel Davis, Dylan Whittaker, Flabu, Flipmeister MK, Jeremy K. Duncan, John Campbell Rees, Leela, Mario Fanboy 15, Matthew Perry, Michael Serrano, Miranda Logan, Nate Harris, Palex, Raven Woods, The Brit Sniper, Toby Loxton, Dan Morrison, Nathaniel Holden, Samuel Brooks, Zarby555, Aaron Carver, Adam Grattan, Darius, Evil Dalek 79, Finley Rude, George is Lost, Ginger Animator, Harvey Smith, Jack D. Evans, James Ivory, Joseph Adams, Joshua McDonough, Ollie Tomlinson, Rebecca Hill, Ricky Temple, Ryan Duncan, Samuel Whittaker, The Raggedy Jedi, Will Be Fat, and Zach Conway. Honestly, as every month goes by, that list gets longer, and I appreciate it so much. You folks here help to keep the lights on here at Mr. TARDIS. They help to keep the live streams going. They help to keep these reviews going, which I love doing, and I'm so glad you folks are enjoying them. With that being said, I wish you a great 2022, and I'll see you folks next time.